Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 9:30 to 10 a.m. session of the 2024 Open Simulator Community Conference. In this session, we're pleased to introduce the presentation, The Padorama, Simulating the Journey by Train from Manchester to Liverpool in 1834. Our speaker is Graham Mills. Graham Mills is a retired university academic with an amateur interest in the history of Liverpool. He uses OpenSim as an aid to better understanding issues of place and scale in historical context. Please check out the website found at conference.opensimulator.org for speaker bios, details of sessions, and the full schedule of events. The session is being live streamed and recorded, so if you have any questions or comments during the session, you may send tweets to at OpenSimCC with the hashtag OSCC24. And of course, you can ask questions in the text chat. Welcome, everyone. Let's begin the session.
Hello, everyone. It's a great pleasure to be here again, and many thanks to the organisers for the opportunity to be here, and also to the devs, the content creators, and the grid owners, without which none of this would be possible. I'm going to pop up some text as I go through. Hopefully, I might do it all in one go. As it says there, I'm not a historian, I'm not an engineer, I'm not a theatrical designer, which is an odd one to choose, but as a consequence, please take what I say with a pinch of salt. And my builds are very, very simple ones, so please, again, bear with me. So, we're interested in immersive experiences, and what I'm trying to put together here is a feel for what an immersive experience was like 190 years ago, and this is the Padorama. In 1830, the world's first modern railway, the Liverpool and Manchester, opened, and 4 years later, London was very interested in railways as well. It had been a great success, and they were building railways. As a consequence, there was an interest, a demand for understanding what railways were about, and the people who constructed the Padorama were obviously trying to provide a service in that regard. The Padorama had its own temporary purpose-built theatre. It was a moving panorama of the Liverpool and Manchester Railway. It took you on a journey of selected sites between the two towns as they were then. And it was exhibited between May and September in 1834 in the Baker Street Bazaar. As it says there, it was a handsome theatre built expressly for the purpose. It opened 10 o'clock till 6 during the summer months, and it cost £1 to enter, which was £3.50 or thereabouts in UK money, somewhere between $4 and $5 or euros. There was a catalogue to go with it, which cost an extra £1, so you were paying a reasonable amount of money to enter, and people expected a reasonable result. It later transferred to Brooklyn and New York, so there was actually an international trade in these things, and allegedly this cost some $30,000 at the time, which would be about $1 million today. A lot of things, however, have probably been lost in translation. Information on the Padorama is relatively sparse. Much of this presentation is necessarily conjectural, and I am kind of learning as I go along. It's been an interesting journey, and I hope you find it the same. The Padorama was based in the Baker Street Bazaar. This was not unusual. It's a shopping mall for the gentility, for the gentry and nobility. It was formerly a horse guards barracks, and as a consequence, lots of space in the parade ground there, but also lots of other buildings that were taken over by people selling various wares. Initially, it was horses, but subsequently, other things, carriages, for example, and ultimately rather upscale houseware. Oh, sorry. The location of the panorama isn't clear, but I initially thought that it might be located in what was called the Great Room, which was a banqueting suite. And the following year, in 1835, it was used for the waxworks exhibition by Madame Tussaud. And this is a continuation of many exhibitions of large-scale artwork in the bazaar that started from the late 1820s. From a lighting point of view, there were 3 large ceiling lanterns. This might be important, but ultimately this was not a big issue because the whole building was gaslit from 1827. The building, I say, it actually occupied a block, or at least 2/3 of a block. So a very large area behind, relatively ill-defined, unfortunately. So the images that I'm going to show you a few of, there were 12 in all, presented over about 25 minutes, and they occupied some 10,000 square feet, so a very large-scale artwork. What distinguished this from other moving panoramas was that there was also a moving foreground, and yes, there were trains. In New York, when the artwork transferred there, there was a proscenium of some description. We'll say more about that in a moment, which was 40 to 50 feet wide by 24 feet tall. I've been working on a height of 18 feet, which gives an aspect ratio of 2.5. And the key feature there is that the aspect ratio of the images in a descriptive catalogue that came with that you had to pay for also had the same aspect ratio. So I think the rationale is that those were very similar to the images that were being shown to people. Most of them face north. As you can see from the map, they're non-contiguous. They are scattered across the distance between the 2 towns. Some are taken from close up, trackside, some are more distant. Historically, most of these moving panoramas involve scrolling the calico canvas between 2 spindles, but this was different in as much as it was steam powered and it operated continuously. So it didn't matter when you came in, you could the whole thing continued on a loop, as it were. It tends to focus on civil and mechanical engineering. People would expect there to be dramatic effects. I can't promise you that, hopefully, but this was the norm for this kind of thing. They were very popular in their day. So here is a couple of the images, one of Manchester and one of Liverpool. The artworks were developed under the auspices of a company called Messrs. Marshall, who had a long history in this. The lead artist was probably a guy called Philip Phillips. In fact, he would have led a team of artists. He was a student of a very eminent scene painter. A lot of these people worked in the theatre. There are lots of crossover between the two. A guy called Clarkson Stanfield. Marshall's panoramas were normally termed peristrophic, which means that they revolved around the viewer. This was unusual in as much as it was referred to as a disynchrotron. And by this, I understand that it means that they were controlling both the background and the foreground. As we've said, it was subsequently shipped to the USA, and after some delay, some 6 weeks or so, was displayed firstly on Brooklyn Heights, in 1835, and subsequently in New York on Broadway in a place called Niblo's Garden, which was an entertainment center. We then lose it from view. Okay, so the proscenium, which I'll say more about, and I've already mentioned in the US iteration of the Padorama, was conventional for moving panoramas at that time. So basically, it was enclosed in a kind of stage. Oh, sorry. Just during the past week or so, however, it's become clear that, in fact, the London iteration of the Padorama was not in a proscenium format, but in a variation rather, of the format, the peristrephic format that I mentioned previously. So we can see, for example, that according to one person, steam carriages describe the arc of a circle in their course. There were sound effects. The carriages and locomotives make rumbling noises as they appear, and they die away as they recede. It was based in a rotunda, a cylindrical building, and the foreground revolves with the picture. This was thought by some to be a tremendous advance. And as we've said, there were model wagons. So as far as the London version was concerned, this is probably what it looked like. This is in fact a rotunda that I built many years ago because there was one in Liverpool on Bold Street. The picture on the right shows you inside the Bazaar rotunda, and with a bit of luck, we'll see that later. And you can see the train circling there, the avatar on the platform, and behind the moving image. Okay, so I think that's as many images as many slides as I'm going to show you. I'm now going to try and res. Please bear with me. So this is the first slide, the first image that people would have seen in the rotunda. I'm going to present it, however, as though it might have been seen in the United States. In the sort of more in the other format. Sorry, this was my original thought as to how it would have been encountered in the bazaar. The great room itself was located on the 3rd floor and probably actually extended above the 3rd floor. So as that wheels into view, bear in mind that I now don't think it was in the great room, but rather in a rotunda, and that rotunda was probably in the parade ground. Bear in mind that, as I said before, this was a horse barracks. So that's my working hypothesis at the moment. So this is a conventional view of what a moving panorama might have looked like. So I'm going to, the curtains served a purpose on their own. All right, it's catching up here. So this is the conventional moving panorama. As I imagined it, it was originally intended to be in the great room, so it would have fitted in quite nicely. This is the stage that you see, the proscenium. I'm just going to open the curtains with a bit of luck. So there we see the first slide. And in fact, if you look, you can also see the black edges. That would have been the more common proscenium in later times. The curtains were useful in as terms of people need to dash out and change things around. They could close the curtains again. So this is the first slide, which was probably quite a generic starter slide. Bear in mind, this is just a continuous, so this isn't anywhere in particular, but it shows the locomotives. So it gives a chance to read up from the descriptive catalogue about the importance of locomotives. So it's a bit clunky, but maybe it was clunky anyway. So we're moving across now to the next image. The whole performance, as I say, took about 25 minutes. This is roughly twice the speed, so please bear with me. That was a particularly odd choice of locomotive, incidentally, because it was actually rather a failure in terms of the design, and there were many different types of locomotive in use at the time on the Liverpool and Manchester. It was very much an experimental railroad. Okay, I'm going to stop at the next image. Bear in mind that there was no stopping in reality, so this is my version of events. Gives me a chance to catch up. Okay, now this is the Water Street Bridge, which was the first cast iron railway bridge. The departure station is on the right, and the arrival station, believe it or not, is on the left. They were on either side of the bridge. I'm going to swap to the other lectern if I can. Oops, excuse me. That's it. So we see one of the things that was kind of special about these was the ability to crossfade. So there's no train here, for example. So perhaps in a standard diorama situation, they would have crossfaded into a train. And this was done basically by back illumination of a painting on the reverse with a train on. And this basically shone through on top of the image on the front of the calico cloth, which was relatively translucent. And we'll fade it back out again. So this was one of the effects that they used. Occasionally, you will notice that we don't actually see the station, but they would also drop images into scenes. So here we have, admittedly, a modern photograph of the station dropped in. So we move on to the next image. Although I'm standing at the lectern, and in many cases there were lecturers presenting on what the viewers were seeing, interpreting it for them, perhaps telling jokes, funny stories, singing songs, doing monologues or duologues. In the case of the Padorama, it's likely that you will be reading the descriptive catalogue as the image changed. Again, you'll see there's an upright piano towards the right. In the case of more upscale productions, it might be even a band or an orchestra, or just somebody playing an accordion. But again, I suspect in the case of the Padorama, there was no musical accompaniment. Whether that changed in the United States, I don't know. So we've just moved along a little bit. You'll notice that it's not completely continuous. In fact, these two shots aren't very far apart. Whoops. But now we can see the train crossing the River Irwell, and in a really fancy presentation, the water would move, all that kind of business. We're moving on now across the river and into a town called Salford, which was originally intended as the destination for the railway. And I'm just going to stop there and show you, hopefully, I'm sorry, a train. I did promise a train, so I will at least show one train moving across. I'm sorry, I've run out of time. But there is a train coming across, and we could also put up a foreground, so we can have a moving foreground, and we can have moving gravel, and everything is very laggy, but you'll get the idea that in theory, at least, it was possible to facilitate some kind of journey experience. Okay, I'm very fast running out of time, so I'm going to stop there and just show you the. So this is what it might have been a little bit like in the States. But finally, I want to show you the rotunda. So this is what I think it was like in the parade ground. Now, you have to imagine that this rotunda is in fact brought down to the ground, and so the entrance would have been through a stairway through that central part that you can see there. This is the, I've just got a couple of images here. The point to make is that these images fill up a very substantial portion, not only of the view, as it were, for the person standing there. They're moving much faster now than they would have done, but as a consequence, they had to have some means of either compressing images or or adding them in, as it were, to the sequence, and this had to be done behind a curtain. So in all likelihood, you only saw part of this platform. There would have been some kind of partition across, and the train and the images would have appeared from there. Now, whether the train actually was at this level, I've got a very small train here. It's much smaller than the previous one, but you get the idea that it's very if you're standing on that platform, it would actually seem much larger relative to the backdrop. So in conclusion,
awesome.
yeah, I'm more or less there. We'll step the slow goods train. I don't think we've got time for that. So this was ending with the rotunda. The scale here is arbitrary. I really haven't spent much time on this one. So we've got two different presentations likely in either side, and it may be that the delay over in America was involved in converting from one display format to the other. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is it. And amazingly, everything worked. So thank you very much indeed.
And you got a lot of applause from the audience. Absolutely wonderful. It just takes you into the past century, an immersive experience back then. How wonderful. Are there any questions to Graham? Blah, blah, blah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Graham, for this informative and fascinating presentation. As a reminder to our audience, you will want to check out conference.opensimulator.org to see what's coming up on the conference schedule. You won't want to miss our next session, which will begin at 10 a.m. in this keynote region and is entitled Virtual World Play, Neuroplasticity, Transfer of Learning, and Discovery Learning. Also, we encourage you to visit the OSCC24 Poster Expo in the OSCC Expo 3 region to find accompanying information on presentations and explore the hypergrid resources in OSCC Expo Region 2, along with sponsor and crowdfunder booths located throughout all of the OSCC Expo regions. Thank you again to our speaker and the audience.